Okay, so the next thing we need to start thinking about is obviously we've managed the performance of the people who are really great, and we've talked about ways to deal with, when everything's going really well, there's rewards, high fives, we're sending out, people on conferences, all that sort of good game, but it doesn't always go that way in business. Sometimes things don't work out the way we want to, despite our very best efforts. So what we need to start thinking about is, when people are underperforming, what are we going to do? Right, how are we going to approach this in a sensible, organised, logical, professional manner? We've all seen the bad boss that when things don't go well, they're throwing stuff and, you need to do better or you'll be fired, you'll be sacked. Okay, yeah, fantastic, looks great. Unfortunately, probably the worst way to actually deal with your people, all right? It does not actually present you in a great light, and it will make sure that you don't have very good, loyal people, all right? You want to get people on board. You want people to feel safe that they can make mistakes and they're going to be supported, so that way we can fix it and move on. Right, sacking people all the time is a great way to make sure you're going through a lot of money, not finding any good staff, and your business won't succeed. It just won't, okay? So don't do it. All right, what we need to do is we need to manage our people. That's why we're managers, we manage things. And one of them is poor performance or underperformance. Okay, that's what we're talking about there, underperformance. Okay, what are we going to do? Okay, we set those targets, we set those goals, we set our benchmarks, and the people haven't achieved them. So, how are we going to fix that? Well, one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that we give the person an opportunity to start correcting that performance, all right? And what we might think about for that is we might think about putting them on a coaching program, a mentoring program. There's a whole lot of different things we can do, and that's what we're going to talk about now. But the key part is to make sure that there's a fair system by which they can actually start to get an opportunity to start meeting their performance again. So what we start to need at the very beginning is we need to sit down and come up with a plan. All right, all these things, we need a game plan. If you played sport, they'd have a game plan. Okay, how are we going to win? They don't just send the players on the team with no idea what they're doing or who's going to do what, or if they do, they don't tend to be a successful team. We need to come up with some sort of plan. Timelines, accountabilities, making sure people know what's going to happen. The key part about a plan, though, is a plan needs to be documented. Okay, the first thing we need to think about is how we're going to lay that out and how's it going to be put to, okay? Because what has to happen is we need an agreed plan between two parties. There needs to be a clear document so everyone knows exactly what's expected and they can always get back to it, and then it doesn't turn into a, oh, but what you said was, or I thought, or whichever. All right, everyone's on a documented plan. We make sure that, when we're going to get into that, we need to start thinking about, what's our initial assessment? Okay, when we're thinking about the plan, we need to think, well, what is our assessment? What are we saying that, based on my experience or based on, what I know as a manager, how far off was that person? Are we talking about it's a little bit of training required, like they've only just missed or something's just a little bit short, or are we way off? Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make that assessment and say, well, what's the likely nature of fixing this? How far off were we? What was the nature of the mistake or nature of the problem? Can we fix it? Is there a willingness, do we think, to fix it? Are they interested in fixing it? What was possibly the source? We need to start using our skills to try and analyse what's going on and start thinking about how we're going to approach this. Then the next thing you need to have is, to start giving some clarity, we need to start thinking about clear definitions. And the first key definition we need to start talking about is targets and deadlines. So target, deadline. Okay, so that means how much of what by when. Okay, so when do we need to do it? What are we going to be doing? What's the point? What's the target? What are we expecting at the end of this, okay? We need to make sure that that is agreed and understood. And once again, it's documented, okay? Everything in writing. We don't do a casual conversation not backed up or reinforced anywhere, because either two things will happen. It won't get measured and won't get done, or people will say, oh, but you said. Okay, there can't be you said, there has to be here's the document. All right, the next thing we need to start thinking about is, were there any training needs that we hadn't already fixed? Okay, did they have anything going? Well, we're supposed to induct these people and maybe we haven't. Was there any training they were undertaking that hasn't been finished? What was going on there? So making sure that all the training that had to have been done has been done. And then start thinking about, well, if they've done that training and we still haven't received a result, what future training or development are they going to need? Okay, so what are their training needs into the future? What do they have coming in and what do they need going out? And how are we going to approach that? All right. That's our initial considerations. Initial assessment, what's going on, clear definitions about what was supposed to happen, what are the targets, what are the deadlines, and then lastly, okay, let's think about where the training is. All right, so now that we've started to get that basic thing down, we start to think about, well, what other information do we need, particularly about coaching? We might need to start seeking some feedback. Okay, before we get right into it, okay, let's start getting some feedback. Maybe feedback from their supervisor. Okay, what did that person think? Maybe feedback from other people in your organisation, how they tackled this problem in the past, but also the person who's being, fixed or dealt with or, coached, engaging them to say, well, what's your expectation and what do you expect this is going to look like? Okay, what's your feedback here? Okay, you've obviously got an opinion, you had an outcome, so we're, seeking your feedback to how we got there. All right. Once again, we need to go back over the definitions and make sure that everyone's on the same page, that everyone understands that it's going to be involved in this, so all understands what are the definitions. What's the definition of success? What's the definition of meeting the target? What am I expecting from the person and what's going to happen there? All right, this is where we start to seek perceptions. Okay, now perceptions are, we start talking about, quantitative data versus qualitative data. Up here, we're looking at feedback, and sometimes that'll be, how many did you sell, what happened. When we get down to perceptions, we're starting to go, well, why do you think it happened? And why do you think that is that way? Or, start to understand how they're seeing the place. Oh, I really wanted to work there, but, my boss is unfair and they don't give me the support I need and everything's terrible and everything's bad, okay? That might or might not be the truth, not the point. What you need to do as a manager is start to listen to that and say, well, is there something to this? Or can I then go back and say yes or no, that wasn't the case, okay? I need to be able to find out where their headspace is at so I can start to talk to them. All right? If I'm going to sit down with a person, I need to acknowledge, okay? The first thing, I need to acknowledge any efforts they have made so far, okay? So what did they put in? What were their results? Okay, so, you've put in no effort and got no result. You put in a lot of effort but got no result. You put in very little effort but still sort of mostly got there. What is it? Are they putting in any effort? And what's the outcome of that effort? All right, so we've got to get that there. And we need to make sure that we've got a way of observing them. And what we're really trying to observe is behaviour, okay? We need to see, well, what are they doing? What are their patterns of behaviour that might be leading them to the lack of performance? Okay, is it that they're just not interested? Is it they're finding it difficult? Okay, and once again, we're not spying on our staff. We're not setting up secret super spy cameras and watching. Okay, that's not a really good way to establish trust. What I need to be able to say to them is, okay, I'm just going to watch you for a while. I'm going to stand here and watch what you do because what I want to see is, well, how do you interact with the customers and see where I might be able to help you. Remember, that's the language here. I am trying to help you. Okay, I'm trying to get you to be where we need you to be so that we can all move on and get on with what we need to do. No one wants to feel hounded and hunted at work. Okay, so we make sure that we deal with people fairly and make sure that they understand what's going on. So now we've done that, we start to be able to evaluate, okay, what their achievements are. Okay, now that we know what's happened and we know why it's happening, we start to get that sort of information, we can start to say, well, what was the target and why didn't we hit it? Okay, we start to be able to create some evaluations. And then we can start to have reviews. Okay, I've got this in place now, we can start having a review. Okay, well, let's set some new goals, let's set some new times, let's observe some behaviour. I'm going to get some feedback, I'm going to get your opinion, and then we're going to set some times aside to make sure we can conduct review meetings, okay, while we're doing the coaching and mentoring program. Once again, we don't want to get to the end and then find out. We should never have a surprise at the end. People don't like surprises, we've covered that. They like to know exactly what's going to happen, and the way that's going to happen is by getting continuous feedback along the way. We don't wait till week 4 of a 4-week program to talk, we talk early. All right, we want to feed forward as much as possible because feedback, hey, by the way, you failed, is sort of useless, okay? Tell them they're failing, don't tell them they failed, okay? Help them along the way, don't just keep judging the results, it's not going to get the change of behaviour you're looking for. Now, if they don't start achieving those results, start thinking about, well, is it deliberate? Do they just not care? In which case, okay, well, you need to think about that. Is it they're not getting it, that it's too difficult, or there's a problem there? Or is there actually some other problem there? Okay, sometimes they can be having all sorts of personal problems and they don't want to tell you because you're the boss. Okay, all of a sudden they find there's something, going on at home, or, they've lost their money, whatever happens to be. They're not going to tell you necessarily because you're the boss. And they don't want to compound their bad luck by then getting sacked from work, or having, you're all of a sudden bringing a lot of, weight onto them. So have those reviews, but make sure they're open conversations where the person has the opportunity to start telling you what might be really going on, apart from, what it might happen to look like, okay? So don't just assume they tell you everything's fine, that it is fine. All right, so moving on from there. What happens if it's still not working? Okay, this is a problem here. We're trying to fix things up, or that, if we find that we've all of a sudden uncovered extra problems, we might need to start thinking about, well, what support can we provide? Okay, if all of a sudden we do find there is another problem, how do we provide support? Because remember, that's the point here, we're trying to be supportive. So, do we need to get them some counselling? Okay, you're not a counsellor, unless you are in fact a counsellor, but don't get involved in that, because there can actually be quite a lot of things there that we're not professionally trained to handle. Our job is to find, as a manager, is to find it, see it, notice what it is, and then refer it to the correct person. Do they need to see a counsellor? Are they going through a breakup? Things like marriage breakups, dealing with gambling issues. I've had staff that have, stolen stuff because they had gambling problems, or family members, and, they get, they have a big weekend and something's happened, they come to work and they don't tell you about it, but they've actually lost their license, have been arrested, all sorts of crazy things, okay? You're not always positioned to deal with that. Make sure it goes to the right channel. You might need to start talking about some mediation. Okay, that might be that the person might find that, look, they don't mind doing the job, but they're having all sorts of problems with their supervisor or other staff members. Okay, so how do we get some mediation into place? All right. We might also think about providing some informal support. Okay, so just as a manager, sometimes all they need to hear from you is that everything's okay. Okay, that you understand that this is just a temporary thing, that there's a plan in place to help them, and they're going to get back up, to where things were. Okay, it's very easy for a lot of people under performance management who have underperformed, particularly if they've been good in the past, to start this dialogue with themselves saying, oh no, now I'm on performance management, I'm going to be sacked. The manager thinks I'm a failure, or think they're a bad person, or somehow they're being judged in a bad way, and this is going to follow them for their career, and it's all ruined, okay? And I'll get into that, really, it's all ruined and I've got no chance. And all I really need you to do is sit down with them and say, okay, well look, it happened. That's okay, it's going to happen from time to time. The question isn't that it happened, it's about, well, how do we fix it and are we moving forward? Okay, so just being able to provide that the assurance to them and coach and mentor them through that, and provide that sort of shoulder, that's great. Sometimes they don't need all the counselling, it isn't that bad. Maybe it's just, they're just having a bad month. The stars and planets didn't align, whatever it happened to be, and you're going to go through and start working with them. All right, so, they're the things that can happen. Think about the counselling option. The counselling option is really there for, things like family breakdowns, okay, divorce, partners leaving, all sorts of funky stuff like that, which is not so great. People can have addictions, drugs, gambling, alcohol. Okay, it happens a lot. And that's often something that they hide, okay, and you'll find out about it when it's well advanced, okay? You won't find out at the early stage, it'll come across late, okay? There can be deaths in the family, which is going to start creating problems. You have things like divorce, okay, depression. Sometimes people are just feeling depressed, okay? They go through a phase or whatever it happens to be. You just need to be aware of it and start thinking about, how can I get them the help they need, all right? They might also have just a lack of confidence, okay? There's a lot of things out there that can take people's confidence away, and it's myriad and it's untold number. Once again, it's not a bad thing. It's not about judging anyone. It's just about understanding that it happens, okay? And then it's how you deal with it that's really going to make the difference. Sometimes they just feel undervalued, like no one cares, okay? That can be another one there as well. If they're feeling undervalued, that you don't appreciate them or they're not appreciated generally, sometimes they can start to switch off and get a bit disengaged. Now, they don't leave because they need a job and they need all those things and they want to feel valued again. If you can provide them value, they'll stick around. But sometimes they just feel, well, I did all this work and they didn't really care. Nothing happened. And no one noticed. If I didn't come tomorrow, would you notice? They could also have a career crisis. Okay, that one happens. I've had quite a lot of employees with that. I had a person working for us merrily for ages, and all of a sudden he stopped performing, and I sat down with him and said, well, you know, what happened? He goes, well, I don't really want to work here. I actually wanted to do something else. And that was a little bit confusing. You wanted to be a real estate agent, he's working in a bank. I said, well, why not just go work in a real estate agent? But he goes, yeah, but I've been working here all this time. And all of a sudden he's having this real sort of drama and conflict. And, you know, really it was about then saying, well, okay, well, how do we transition you to where you need to be? Because if it's not here and you don't really, you know, okay, strange things. As a manager, you're going to come across strange things. Be prepared and know where to channel them, okay? And the other one can also be workplace stress. Now, workplace stress is a big one. Things like bullying and, you know, just the job, the pressure, okay, can get to people from time to time, particularly if you're not giving people breaks and holidays and those sort of things. It will amalgamate, you know, it will amalgamate all the stresses, all those problems will compound, and you'll find that if you don't give people an outlet, you'll get an outlet when you really don't want it, okay? And that can have all sorts of problems there, okay? So thinking about how those work. Now, getting back to the mediation sessions, we're sort of saying that, you know, it could be workplace bullying and that interpersonal communication amongst people. We need to get in there and thinking about, you know, how do we break it up? It could be staff members conflicting. Okay, I've had sales teams where one person felt the other person was stealing their sales, so they've said something back to this person, then this person got involved, and then someone else saw it, and then the next thing you know, the whole place, there's just infighting. And when you go there, it's unpleasant. Now, you've got to think about, do you have the ability to untangle that as a manager or as a supervisor? Or maybe you need to bring in someone from the outside. And someone from the outside might be, you know, a manager from another place. It could be another senior staff member who understands how the system works to come in and sort of, you know, untangle. It could actually be professional mediation where you get someone to come into your organisation depending on who you are. Okay, professional counsellor who can sit down once again and say, well, okay, let's deal with the, you know, the real issues here and try and get to the bottom of it for you. Okay, now that should be a whole of group approach. Okay, so you want to get everyone understanding what the behaviours were that led to that. Where did the conflict come from? Okay, don't just go he said, she said, or just the two people. You might have a look at everyone in the organisation because even though it might be between 2 or 3 people, everybody in your place knew it. Everybody saw it. It has affected everyone, whether they're sort of saying it or not. So make sure they're all involved in that conversation. All right. And lastly, you know, things like your employee counselling sessions, you're there to provide support around performance, okay? A lot of these other issues, that's not really where you're at, okay? And you should only really start thinking about, you know, employee counselling if you are actually a counsellor, okay? Unless you're a counsellor, don't get involved in counselling, all right? As far as, you know, marital issues or whatever, okay? Your opinion and your advice is probably very good, but, you know, maybe not necessarily for here and can lead to further problems. So start to think about, if you are going to sit down and talk to people, make sure that you're starting to get the right information. Make sure you've looked at any employee manuals or any staff manuals or any policy or guides that you might have. Make sure that you start gathering up any evidence that you require. So if you're saying it's about performance, make sure you get their performance sheets, okay? Think about if you are going to go down the path of having a conversation with them, make sure that you, you know, approach it in a structured and logical manner. Some of the key things to make sure that happens is make sure that, you know, it's scheduled. Okay, don't do things off the cuff where, hey, you and I need to go have a chat. We're going to grab an office and have a chat right now. Because that person's going to feel attacked and they're not going to feel that they're prepared and ready. Okay, make sure, you know, your tone is positive. Okay, you're here to help. Okay, they need to understand from the beginning, you're here to help. Okay, be cooperative. Okay, you're there not to be all judgy and sort of, you know, tell them what they did wrong, but you're there to be professional, cooperative, and be focused, okay? Pay attention to them. Don't schedule a meeting and then sit there looking on your internet or doing something else. Okay, you're in that meeting, you don't have any other priorities other than that, but that is all you're doing, okay? At that point, you are trying to seek clarification. Okay, you need to have one mouth and 2 ears. And at this point, that's when you say, okay, why do you think it happened? And then you stop and you let them reply. Don't tell them why it happened. Start talking to them. Get them talking, okay? The information will come out and you're seeking the clarification. Okay, so what do you think went wrong? Okay, so we tried to do this and this is what we ended up with. So why do you think that is? Well, at the end, once everything's done, it has to end again on a positive note. Okay, that they walk away not feeling like their days are numbered and that you're hunting for them now, but actually that, look, we're here to help you. I understand this has gone on. I've understood now, I'm trying to cooperate and trying to fix this. Okay, I need the clarification of what you believe happened and how it happened. Okay, we're now here to fix that and try and start working on a process to start fixing whatever's happening. Make sure you then give a written summary. Okay. And that can often be in form of an email or a diary note to say, hey, we sat down and we discussed this issue together. I'm just recapping what you said it was. You told me this was a concern, this was a concern, this was a concern. And when we finished that, we talked about, what our next steps are, and then make sure that you then follow up. Okay, no just, yeah, we had a chat that day, here's an email, see you later, follow it up. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but there's a reason we do all this. One is to reinforce with them that things are going to get better, but the reality is as a manager, sometimes they don't get better, okay? And the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we've documented a process whereby we've identified what's not working, we've let the person know it's not working, they know, we all know, and this is when we're going to start moving through the process of managing their performance, and it might lead to termination, which means the earlier we get our documentation in, that's the sooner the process started, and if things don't work the way we need to later, okay, we can do something about it. Okay, this starts to lead us into discipline. All right. Okay, so now that we've gone through the basics of dealing with people that are underperforming, hopefully the first time we dealt with it, the problem went away. We've coached, we've mentored, we've found the problem, we've identified the problem, we've talked it through, we've engaged counsellors, we've engaged our processes to make sure that we stop the problem continuing, and hopefully that meant that it was done. The business reality is that it isn't always done, and that things might continue on. In which case we might start to think about some sort of discipline process. Okay, about starting to firm up how we deal with that person. Okay, it's a tool, and it's a tool that's there to begin to rectify continuous poor performance. Okay, we don't want them to continue engaging in an activity or conduct or a behaviour that's not useful for the company and not what we're trying to do there. Okay, it's not in step with our values nor the outcomes that we're setting out to achieve. Okay, so what we're looking for there is when someone is consistent. Okay, they're consistently failing to achieve a goal, or they're consistently exhibiting a behaviour that we find unacceptable. Okay, they're always disappearing off, taking excessive breaks. They never turn up to work on time. They're whatever it happens to be. Okay, and it could be a lot of gossip, or carrying on the water cooler. You can never find them every time you're looking for the person. They're outside having a cigarette. Who knows what it is? Okay, there's a whole range of things that can create problems for us. And what we need to do is to try and say to that person, hey, that's not an acceptable behaviour, and we need to bring it back to a level that is acceptable to us. Okay, we're not saying you can't talk to people, absolutely not. We're not saying you can't go for a cigarette. We're not saying you can't go to the toilet. We're not saying that the train isn't late every now and then, but it's not late every day, okay? We can't always be out having cigarette breaks. We can't always be out doing whatever we're doing. So we need to think about, well, what is appropriate and what's not, all right? So what the staff member has to then do is come to a realisation. And the realisation that we want them to get to is that their behaviour has to stop. Okay, they need to cut it out. And we need to ensure that they're committed to that. Okay, we don't need them to go, oh yeah, no worries boss, yeah, sorry mate, yeah, I didn't mean it. Oh look, next week, yeah, I'll cut out the cigarette breaks, yeah, no worries. No, they just pay it off and then the behaviour continues. So we need to make sure that they understand what's going to happen, and we need to start to provide some encouragement there as well. So they need to understand that their behaviour is being observed. Okay, that we are looking at that, and the way we do that is by once again maintaining ongoing communication, making sure we've got our comments, etc. Okay, we're trying to reinforce good behaviour, and we're trying to cease bad behaviour. Well, not bad behaviour. We're not your parents. We're talking about behaviours we want. Now the reality is that sometimes even when we say to people, hey, look, this is what's going on, need to curb that, change that, whatever. It doesn't necessarily work out. It could be the rest of their performance isn't where it needed to be. Okay, it's repeatedly not hitting sales targets. We're trying to do everything we can. Look, at the beginning of the process or early on in the process, we need to let them know that these things may lead to termination. Okay, not a word we like to throw around very easily, but in plain English, okay, it might mean that they leave the organisation. Okay, termination is where we cease their employment and move them on. Now, we need to think about the Workplace Relations Act and think about where we come into labour laws and whatever's applicable to them, it could be their contract law, whatever it happens to be. We need to make sure that we're observing that and we understand that, what are the conditions under which that person can be terminated, okay? And what is the process we need to go for? How much information do we need to give? And one of the things that almost always cuts through is serious misconduct. Okay, and you need to understand that serious misconduct is not they don't necessarily like you and you don't like them. Serious misconduct is not I took an extra cigarette break, okay? Serious misconduct as defined under law is things like fraud, okay? It's assault, it's intoxication, it's negligence. If they're stealing money from you, that's serious. An extra cigarette break, maybe not as much. Okay, so you need to get a bit of context there as well. Serious misconduct is things where they're stealing money. They're attacked another staff member physically. And I've seen that in places I've worked as well, where, and it was often because of intoxication, the staff Christmas party gets too much. Okay, remember, you've given them a whole pile of alcohol and then they've punched somebody. So you might need to think about what your liabilities are there and set expectations from the beginning as well. So if they're intoxicated at work, that can have certainly effects, and that's serious. And negligence in their job, okay? Where they're putting other people's safety clearly at risk. Safety issues, okay? That's a serious misconduct and create problems. We also talk about, willful or premeditated behaviour. Things they might do to, create problems at the workplace that mean that we can't continue to employ them, okay? We might start thinking about, any other sort of behaviour that leads to a risk to the health or safety of another person. Also things that might lead to reputation damage, viability or profitability of their business, okay? We've seen that particularly in the days of social media. People all of a sudden get on representing their company on Facebook or whatever it happens to be, and some employee drags their employer through the mud, okay? They get on there and they make these things about, I hate working for XYZ, they're the worst boss in the world and what a terrible place to work, and I hate it so much I just wish they'd die in a fire, and then the employee can't understand why they got terminated the next day, okay? If you're creating a real problem there, that can be fairly serious. As I say, it's not a cigarette break, it's something serious is what creates misconduct, which may lead to a termination under law. The last one is things like a refusal to carry out lawful and reasonable instruction. Okay, so if you ask someone to do their job and they keep saying no, okay, and that's clearly their job, okay, obviously that starts to become a thing there as well. Okay, we can start to consider termination at that stage, all right? What we're trying not to do is move into a position where minor things are called serious things, because that might be in breach of various labour laws and place you in a very precarious position, okay, where you could be sued, etc. All right, so when we start talking about that, we might start talking about dismissal. Okay, once again, an area we have to tread very carefully if we're going to summarily dismiss someone. So if we're going to, dismiss someone, we need to start making sure we've done the very basics. And the first one is, did we give this person a chance to explain themselves? Okay. Before we told the person, look, we're letting you go, did we give them an opportunity to explain themselves? Because if we didn't, okay, that's going to reflect poorly on us. Remembering that the person might turn around later and take us to court and say we didn't follow a fair process. So to give them a chance to explain, okay? We need to make sure that, okay, so a chance to explain becomes a big one. Okay, we need to make sure that we're following, that there is a due process and a sense of natural justice. We need to follow that, was the activity behave, okay, did it happen, did we get involved immediately? Did we just leave it for months and then say something, or did we do it straight away? Okay, were we timely in our actions in dealing with that? Okay, very, very hard to come back to someone and say, well, 6 months ago you said, okay? 6 months ago is too late, we need to get on that today. And then we also need to be able to objectively, state its misconduct. Okay, now remember, well, serious misconduct. Remember, we're back up here. It needs to be serious. Are we certain it was serious? Okay, so, once again, not, they took a cigarette break or whatever it happens to be. And then, did we follow the procedures for our company? Okay, we have our own, usually we'll have some sort of procedure or policy manual that outlines how these things are supposed to happen. Okay, so have we walked through the system? So in order to start to look at things like procedural fairness, we need to be able to make sure that if it was enough to warrant dismissal, we've given them a chance to explain themselves, we've acted in an immediate and timely fashion, We can objectively state, so we can prove, okay, not well, I reckon, but actually evidence to what it happens to be. No, I reckon, so it has to be able to be demonstrable. And have we followed out the procedures of our company? All right, so if we need to terminate, and it needs to be a summary termination like right now, or pretty quick to the point, have we made sure we've covered ourselves? Because failure to do that can land you in court and can be very, very expensive because the person can turn around and they might have absolute grounds to come back at you. All right, it's not a case of I sacked him, he's gone. It's a case of they also have a right of reply through the legal process. So make sure you've covered that very well. Okay, just need to, and then that's pretty much, you should be okay. The element we're looking for here is procedural fairness, and that means that if it was based on poor performance, that we gave them a chance to fix things. If they had a behavioural issue, that we gave them enough written warnings, okay, to make sure that they were fully appraised of the situation. They don't feel that I never got a chance to do anything. I was never given a chance to improve my behaviour. I was never told this was a problem until they sacked me. Okay, you need to make sure that they are completely understanding what's going on and given an actual real chance to fix it. Okay, and that doesn't mean I told you on Friday you were a problem, then on Monday I sacked you. Okay, that means allowing sufficient time to correct the problem, allowing time between warnings for them to start to move into it and understand what's going to happen, and actually set the circumstances where they actually have a real fair chance to correct their behaviour. If we don't do that, it's pretty unfair.